This is the third session of a suite of 3 that myself and Mal have ran over the last 3 months, actually. So September, October, November. And when we were asked to do it as part of a suite, we did have a discussion on the order of the content of where they went, purely because where this third one lands, we think, is going to be roughly slap bang in the middle of where a lot of us included, a lot of schools are going to be running their mocks. And at this point, I suppose, as we lead up to Christmas, is a common time to have mocks, and some schools have them just after, but it's generally around now-ish. And that was the whole organisation of the 3 that we looked at in terms of the content. So the crossover was a big part of the theme, which carries on into this session today as well. But it's ultimately about those decisions and I suppose the housekeeping around this time of year, and trying not to forget about a few key things as well that can play part of your thought process at these mocks ready for the real exams. I said the real exams, the summer exams, as we approach May and June next year. The agenda of what we're going to look at today, the biggest decision, big question mark there. We know what that big decision is, the higher foundation, who it affects, not just us as teachers, but which students in particular, what we've done, how we've done it, as a bit of a case study, I suppose, at our school that we're working at the moment. But then also the view of, is this a short-term thing that we look at? Is it over a bigger period of time? And then finally, we'll go a quick run through of the support from Pearson and any questions from you guys. Please feel free at any point to pipe up, pop a question in the chat. Just be aware that there is about an 8 to 10 seconds, maybe even a little bit longer delay from what you see and hear from when I actually said it. So just bear that in mind, that it might be that we're halfway through talking about something else as we start answering your question. But if there's anything we don't answer throughout or we don't get to, conscious of trying to stick to the time limit, please feel free to email us. I think my email address is at the end, but I'll also share Mal's. There's both of us in terms of any questions that you might have throughout. A little bit about us that we always throw in at the start, and I'm just going to assume a little bit that a lot of us have seen the suite of 3, but I won't assume in terms of any content being missed or scanned over. But in terms of us, who we are, we've worked at the most improved school in England. In fact, we were part of the team that took it there. But then also we took a maths team to the TES Maths Team of the Year. It was 2016, so we've milked it out a little bit over the last 5 years, and we're going to continue milking it out to 2036, I think. Mal, what do you reckon? But we say it purely because we're teachers. We are teachers. We teach in the classroom. Some things work, some things don't. A lot of things that we're going to talk about today, in fact, a big chunk of what we're going to talk about today, we're going through these decisions right now. We're going to look to you for guidance and advice. That what are you doing? Do you agree with us? Do you not agree with us? We're going to talk about the formula sheet, a big question that's going to come up partway through today. Really interesting on people's thoughts. As much as what we've got an opinion on, we love listening to everyone else's opinion and ideas as well. But we are teachers in the classroom, more important than anything that we do. We do work for Pearson in terms of a day a week secondment. So it's not that we work for Pearson, we're seconded to them, but it does mean that we're available. And this time of year in particular, we had a school come and visit us last Thursday, so a week ago tomorrow. Geez, where's that time gone already? And it was just coming and having a look at what we do, coming to see the super group where we've got 56 year 11 group students in one room, 2 teachers, that we're open, come and see us. But also because we've got that secondment day, we do have the capacity to come out and support you guys. And I don't mean support in terms of help. I mean support as in backup. So the guys that came out on Thursday, we're going to go back out to their school after the mocks, so in January time, to compare our mocks data with their mocks data and just sit down and spend some time looking through it. So please feel free to contact us on that side of stuff as well. Mal's health warning.
Yeah. So I'm Mel. You heard me chuckle. I like to do a health warning at the start of all of these things to say that we're not professing to have all the answers. It is based on a case study, so none of this is saying it's the way it should be done. It's not Pearson saying it. Is purely from us sharing our experience and the kind of strategies and ideas that we're implementing and I have been doing for the last, 15 years we've been working together in 3 different schools, which scares the life out of me. No offence, Seeger. I could just feel... it can't be all bad. We're still doing it at the 3rd school, so maybe if we'd fallen out at the 1st school. So we have had particular success. And again, it is all about context. I usually put a big context thing, and I haven't done it for this one, because some of you will work in high-performing schools, some of you will work in independents, some will be working in state schools. You'll have different profiles, so what we talk about works for us. It might not be working in every situation. Similarly, when we do have visitors or we go out, we would never profess to have all the answers, because at the end of the day we are teachers, but we do know that, and I always feel a little bit guilty about this, that we consider ourselves to be exam monkeys, that it is about, and some people hate it, it's about doing the right thing for our kind of school students because of the kind of context we work in. So there's my little health warning, because I do get misquoted. When we were going back 2017, 2016, we found that it was quite difficult to make those decisions about tiering. And I still think it is our biggest that we've got. The original tiering guidance still stands. So from Pearson's perspective, there is that tier, and there's some key points in it. So this is something that when we're talking about different students, it's about their confidence and they're competent with that underlying material. How well do they tackle the common questions? So there's a couple of things that we'll talk about. The one that I didn't put in here that occurred to me when I was driving home from work this evening is that our current year 11, when they were in year 10, their assessments that we did about Easter prior to their end of year exams, we did what we called ranking papers. So and I may have put it in here, I don't know, I don't think I did. So we ranked the whole year group, and it was purely common assessment material, the crossover material, that enabled us to rank the year group from 1 to 280, there or thereabouts. And so we've been a bit proactive with our current year 11s, that we went going right back to Easter. We were already thinking, and we tackled some of those issues head on. So that common question, and I think it was a really good exercise, Seeger. Would you agree?
Well, it just happened, didn't it? It was all year 11 about the RAG and how are we going to do it. And we got talking as a team, and Mal came up with the idea of, let's do a common assessment for that year group. And it just happened by default. It was such a good experience with year 11. We said, what about having a benchmark that we can move forward each year, and let's get year 10 to do it. Yeah. And what a brilliant exercise it was in terms of having that knowledge of where everyone is sitting in a position in the year group, regardless of tags or CAGs. This was all for just knowing the students, wasn't it? It was a real good exercise. It really was.
And from that, and because we had the year 11 data, we had the year 11 when the current year 11s when they were into year 10. It is something we're going to continue to do with our year 10s going forward. We're very much an advocate for using comparable data, I suppose you could say. So our baseline assessment that we do in September, we've used the same papers to enable us to look at our current position compared to this time last year, and this time 2 years ago, and this time 3 years ago. Prior to that, we weren't at the school. So we're able to almost, again, be proactive and not leave it till their mocks. So when we're considering the tiering of these students, these questions are still very pertinent. How well do they approach the routine problems, the problem solving and non-routine questions? And the last question there is key for me, is about how is their performance likely to be different if they're faced with a paper they find tough? Some of you out there will remember the first set of mock papers, or the first sample papers. I think it was mock set 1, where the first question on the higher tier was a mixed number fraction. Paper 1, the students came out as a mock, particularly the female students, because they didn't have that easy lead into the paper. There were some meltdowns. And we've started really honing in on this, I suppose, especially with certain students, talking about their emotional reaction to a paper, I suppose, it's very a fluffy way of saying it. So all of those questions are still pertinent, and I think we do question ourselves constantly about them.
Well, we got into a good conversation, didn't we, with our guests on Thursday, and we were talking about what our benchmark is, what tests that we fell into the trap of using. And with our Year 11, just complete transparency with everyone here, please don't tell our Year 11s, but we've used mock set 4. That seems to be our benchmark that we've used. No, just the way it's happened. But the conversation we got in, and Mal just hit the nail on the head then, about this conversation about tough versus an easier paper. We never know what's going to come around the corner in the summer for Year 11. A tougher paper with lower grade boundaries, an easier paper that is generally more accessible with higher grade boundaries. But we're a high school where we start with Year 9, so we have to hit the ground running. And we've been using, for the last 2 years, and wrongly or rightly, the November 2017 papers. And they're tough, very tough. And it's almost a bit of a shock for some of the students. And we won't know the real fruit of it, whether it's been success or not, until probably GCSE results come out this year, because this year group did it when they were in Year 9. And they're exposed to a tougher paper instantly. This is what we're aiming for at the end of Year 11. And the standard is, I say standard hasn't changed. The organisation that we talk about, in fact, I'm talking about now, actually, it leads in quite nicely. The organisation has changed. The standard has not changed. So when people say they were harder back in 2017, they weren't harder. There was less questions that took the amount of time that they did back then. There's a better structure, so we know that the start of the papers are certain type of questions. So with the Foundation 1 marker, something on the higher that people can generally get their teeth stuck into. So you don't have those tiers instantly on the higher paper, particularly from the kind of students that need their hand holding into that higher paper. So we had a brilliant discussion on Thursday about actually, it was the pros and cons of using a tough paper at the start to get them ready for the course. And I think it's actually playing into our favour a little bit, knowing that was the standard they're trying to hit early doors, that anything that comes after is a bit more organised, it's a bit more structured in terms of what we're going to talk about now and what you can see on the screen. So we know what to expect almost now. I'm not saying it's a given. I'm not saying we have a complete idea that some kind of question's going to crop up. I think it's a lot harder over 3 papers to predict than what it used to be back with the 2 exam papers. But we have an idea, and we can tell the students the structure of what to expect. We have competitions where we're trying to get as many marks at the start of a foundation paper in practice in class. That helps for higher and foundation students. We know the type or the ilk of question that's going to start off a higher paper. We know that there are going to be, not multiple choice, but there's going to be those matching kind of questions at some point. We know that the end of the paper is going to be tougher than the start. We know the end of the foundation is not going to be the start of a higher. So it's just all those little bits that we've learned over the 3 years that actually, if we start off with that year group, and I'm not saying secondary schools you start off with year 7 on this, but expose them to those earlier papers where that structure wasn't there and build in conversations as the year goes on. So we're not just talking about instant gut feeling now at mock period of year 11. I'm talking about something 2 years ago. That preparation you can build into as the papers change, that the students see. Actually, have you started to spot this over the last couple of papers, kids? What have you seen here? And expose them to what we've gone through as teachers over the last 3 years, that we've seen it settle down. But yeah, sorry, I rabbled on a bit there, didn't
I? So for me, the tiering decision still remains the biggest decision that we have to make as teachers. And I thought I'm going to go back and have a look at all my tiering documents. And it went right back to 2017. And there's a load of stuff that I've collated about that we've used, data, in a little folder. Because it's a massive decision we have to make. So if I put that into context, and it is, you keep using the phrase, the school we moved to went into special measures when the entire maths department, not because the maths department had left, but the entire maths department had left. I was doing some SLE work to support them, the new maths team. That first year group that I was supporting, the maths team, we were talking about nigh on 25% of the year group, we had some tiering decisions to make. The school was obviously where it was at that time, and some of those decisions may not have been made at the right time for those students. We felt that this time last year we'd got that down to 17 students. Which was a massive improvement, and we think we've got it almost right this year, where we've been proactive about those decisions, because when you consider moving students from higher because they haven't got the marks that they're going to need to, there's a danger of moving them off they'll drop off the bottom. Making that decision in February and March for some students will be too late, because they haven't been exposed to for some of those students, it may be a few years since they were asked to I don't know, 2/5 is a decimal. I know a higher student, I'm trying to think about those kind of 1-mark questions that they haven't seen because they've been in a group that's purely focused on higher. So moving students down to the higher tier, and similarly moving students from the foundation upwards later on, is really tough. But to put this into, again, using the words, put it into perspective, I'm going to use. Back in June 2019, and we haven't mentioned the statistics, year 11, so students that were age 16, for Pearson's entries, and this was based on a document on the Emporium, 52.5% of the entries were higher and 47% was foundation. So that's for their age 16 entries. So I'll say that again, 52.5% was higher and 47.5% was foundation, just for age 16, so for year 11. But when you factor in the resits, that profile swung. And it swung to where it was only 42% higher and 57.2% foundation. So for us, we're trying, we are looking, we have a higher than average performance on entry. So we are looking at our higher foundation split, trying to think about what is our end game. So back 3 years ago, we were thinking about where do we need to be in terms of our higher foundation split based on the national averages for year 11, not all students, because there is a misnomer there and people do start going, oh, but only 42% were on higher, but that's all students. So there was something on Twitter this week when people were asking what mix of higher foundation, and it's quite interesting when you have that conversation. So we are aiming, and we think at the minute, I'd have to do this, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, and I don't want to quote figures without it being right, but I will look at what our higher foundation split currently is and what it's likely to be. But it's moving, depending on what we're going to do with the mocks.
So when Mal said a minute ago that year group we had several, then we got it down to about 17, and we've got it about right now, what we mean there is that there's still students, we don't know where they're going to be in the summer. What we're saying is that we've got it right in terms of the groups that they're in now, the content they're being taught, and the first stab at a mock in year 11 now is the right thing for the students. We've had conversations at parents' evening, completely different conversations with students of the same background attainment, but with different perspectives on life, different support from home, that's saying in one breath for one family, we really want to be on higher for the summer. Another one saying we really want to be on the foundation. And we've got to take that into consideration as well with everything that we do, because we all know that maths is not a linear learning. And as much as schools very much like to think behind the scenes that data and admin and whatever goes in the systems is linear, we know it's not. And the things click towards the end, particularly for the type of students we're talking that are on that border between the higher and foundation. And it's down to the wire for some students, and that doesn't mean you've got it wrong. That doesn't mean you've made a mistake. That means that it's just taken till that point to make that call. But you've got to keep the options open as much as you possibly can throughout year 11. The mock, a mock you've got to make a decision for. We've had to make a decision based off our super group, going for as many this time, in fact, all of our super group, which is the borderline students, onto foundation. We want it to be, hopefully, after the way that the year has gone in terms of progress and learning and doing very, very well, it's going to be a confidence boost. From that, then we can make the call, and we literally go down to the wire. We look at how have they performed on the crossover questions in that higher paper before even considering can they then go on to the next step of doing the higher paper. Because if they've got 60 out of 80 done brilliantly, but the 20 marks they lost were from question 24 onwards, there's your answer. We've just got to try and really polish up some of those questions to do very, very well on the foundation. Alternatively, on the other side, you can get students that have got 30, 40 on a foundation paper, but they've nailed the end of it. And they're just their basic skills, their knowledge from previous years building up to year 11 is very, very low. But what they've picked up in year 10 and 11 is fantastic. And they're picking it up in terms of the crossover content, the exam focused. And then you have those conversations. The key thing to keep your options open that we talk about again at a point a bit later is that you've got to not have this higher foundation mentality within the lessons. It's only for the assessment, not the lessons. And I say that sounding like a right teacher, don't I? I'm saying that in terms of keep the options open, have the lessons. Don't think about foundation and higher students in one room, stressing you out. I've got the split in my room. I've got to prepare work here, prepare work there. The standard has got to be high, and it's got to be high for the crossover. It's got to be that content that's key to both. Once you've got that, you've battled through that in terms of understanding of what it is, the assessment is just ticking a box at the end of the day and making sure that they're prepared for it. But it is tough. Al started off by saying it's the toughest question we face.
And one of the reasons that I think it's tough is the danger of getting it wrong. The implications is that if we get it wrong, there is the potential that a student could leave with a grade 3 or a grade U or a U. And that's quite a scary context for me. The emphasis is different, and this is why it's such a tough decision, is that the content, so the assessment of the content domain is different on the higher and foundation. So 25% of the foundation is number, but only 15% of the higher is number. There is more algebra on higher. But it's not just that content domain, it's also the assessment objectives. So the fact is, 50% of the foundation is AO1, which is generally the using and applying. Whereas only 40% is just do it, just those kind of simple using and applying questions. And that's really quite subtle, that difference. It is trying to teach higher and foundation students together, where you're trying to hit all of those tick boxes is almost impossible, which is exactly what links into what Seeger says. The dog's just walked in. Sorry. So the trying to tick those two boxes is almost impossible. So having those high expectations and being prepared to go off-piste and push them on a little bit, because we're not just there to just teach them to the exams, isn't a bad thing. So, for example, I know that when Seeger was doing index laws today, Monday, he was taking our supergroup further on than they needed to, just purely for foundation, and he was exploring some of the higher concepts with the group, and not just limiting it to just here's a question, just do one. So yeah, that difference is quite subtle. Interesting comment that I teach a number of autistic students. They're great at procedural maths, but they'll often get the foundation 1 markers wrong. It's really frustrating sometimes for all students, when you know that they can do the process stuff, or they can do and sometimes there's no rhyme and reason where these have come from. It's almost, to use a phrase I'd say to the kids, it's almost like they've had a brain fart, that it just comes out of nowhere, this obscure concept. So yeah, just bear that in mind. And then the types of students, it falls into 2 brackets really, doesn't it, students, Seeger?
Yeah, again, it's all about that context of the lesson of the group that you're trying to deal with in front of you, that you're preparing them for an exam, you're not preparing them for high, you're not preparing them for foundation. That's a background to it. That becomes almost like a secondary structure, what the exam is. But yeah, higher prior retainers that are underperforming, again, I think sits nicely with what you just said there about certain individuals that can just get certain parts of an exam, but not other parts. And I think over year 11, the job is to iron it out a little bit, but also work out who these are. It's all well and true and easy having data in front of you of who are higher prior retainers, who are not quite getting there. But I tell you what, when you start hitting middle, even lower attainers, what is a middle attaining student? What is a middle performing student? And when does it click from being a higher prior to a middle, and when does it click from being middle to a lower? And I think it's all about just having high aspirations, high drive. And I use an example that I've several years now that I've used this example. A school that asked me to go into support in terms of 2 things: data, their results weren't very good, and pupil premium boys, the results weren't very good. So went in, saw some lessons, went into a maths class, and it was I haven't used this phrase for such a long time, it doesn't exist in the organisations I've worked in, purely because I've not allowed it to happen, and we've not allowed it to happen. A sync group, and I felt sick. There was a group in there, predominantly boys. There was about 11 or 12 of them, and they were doing, in year 11, rotational symmetry. But they weren't doing it as a lesson. They were colouring something in to get it. Now, I do understand sometimes a very small nurture group needs little stepping stones, but this was, and I did the analysis there and then, I think it worked out about 20 no, it was 50% of their pupil premium students in that room, and that was one of their targets. And the room was just had no drive, no push, and it was just doing something for a foundation question, if that makes sense. And it's all about having, I'm not saying that you have to stretch and push these to being at the point of not getting a lesson and then behaviour kicks in, but it can't go the other extreme that you're doing something like colouring in and rotational symmetry to try and keep the behaviour under control for your lower prior retainers. So it's all about having that high drive, high aspiration for the groups, no matter who they are.
Yes, so when we're thinking about the students that we're considering about tiering decisions, it could be a student from a set 1, a student from a set 2. Depends on context. For us, it would be our set 1, set 2, that may not have got enough marks to get a grade, or there is a danger. And there's a couple of examples that at the end of year 10 they sat and they'd got 6, 6 and 6 on each paper. That when we gave them a foundation, they're smashing it and getting 68 on their baseline assessment. Does that mean they're underperforming? Not necessarily. There may be things going on in their life. But then at the bottom end, there are students that we've sucked up into our supergroup that come in on a key stage 2 of, say, 94, that on their baseline assessment were getting 20 something that we know are definite foundations, but there's also students there that over the periods of their life, if we look at, there's one student there back in year 9, if somebody had looked at her purely on data, she would have been a student that you would say foundation, that because she's gone on a route of where we've had these high expectations, she's gone up to a set 1 and she will go on. So for us, it's been a long-term plan. So it's not just about the year 11. I know that it's almost proactive and reactive, and I think that one piece of advice is try to be proactive and go back and think about it before year 11. I know the situation is different with what's happened. But one of the key
in front of them, isn't it? It's that dropping stuff here. It's about the teachers that are with the key students. I say key students, they're all key, but as you build up into year 11 to help you get your head round and support your tiering decisions, who has been in front of the students leading up to year 11? Do you mix things around? Is it a school that a teacher falls off at the end of year 11 with a group and gains it when they come back in year 7 and sees that number through all the time? Or do you have key teachers that play to their strengths with certain types of individuals? So go back and audit, and literally a 10-minute job, who is teaching certain individuals, because you can tell, I promise you, the ones that you're going to have those tiering decision ideas, conversations with in year 11, back when they're in year 9. And who is dealing with those? Who's got those students? Is it a matter of you're setting yourself up that you know you're going to have more issues because of who is back there teaching those students? I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm meaning that in terms of playing to the strengths of the teachers, right place, not just year 11.
So if we look at our current situation, the groups that we had back in year 9 for the current year 11s, we had set 2s to make sure, assuming that our set 1s were secure or would be secure on their 3-year journey, we had the set 2s to try to secure them back then. And then as that year group came in year 10, we'd moved down to set 3s to try to secure our set 3s, and now we're trying to soak up everybody else. So, and it's not a reliance on us, because we've got other teachers involved with us now to sort of future-proof it and to sort of spread that good practice. And it seems to be working for us. We'll see from this summer. But trying to make sure they're on this correct path. We, at every opportunity, we do move students, because our scheme work allows it, where we are reviewing those under and overperforming students. We generally don't move on one data point. or sometimes not even 2 data points. It might be that we talk to parents, and we did a massive exercise at the end of year 10. It comes back to that proactive, reactive. At the end of year 10, where we had students that we needed to move to foundation for confidence, and I think myself and 3 other teachers, of all of those students, and there was about 80 or 90 students, we rang parents to say, look, this is where we're at. We've reviewed their end of year 10 data. There is a danger they're going to fall off the bottom of the higher tier, so we're going to put them in a crossover set. But similarly, there were some students that we would have liked to have gone on to do the higher tier, and that was always part of our 3-year plan with them, was to move them to the higher tier. We're saying they're not quite ready for it yet, or they were not at that point. And it was really nice that on the last year 11 parents evening a couple of weeks ago, me and Siga were texting each other, and it was lovely to be able to say, I've just on the phone, on the call to so-and-so's parents, they're loving being in the supergroup, but building confidence, even though that they felt at the time that they'd been demoted. The one thing I would say, and this is for all year groups, all set moves, that sometimes where you have a student that is punching massively above their weight, whatever year group, we have learnt to our cost, really, that moving a student from, say, a set 3 to a set 1, it hasn't always worked. And I will always now say to students that I don't really want to move you up a set unless we can move you in, and you're going to go in at least halfway, halfway up the next set, with a view that if they're going in and they're at the bottom of the set above, sometimes the reason they're overperforming in relation to their peers in their current set is because they're flourishing being the top of the set. And when you do move students up and they've gone from being the big fish in the big fish in the big ponds, and they go up and they're down at the bottom of the league table, hasn't always worked. But again, those kind of moves, we do engage parents. We've had a couple with our current year 10s where parents are pushing, and we're saying, look, they are doing really well in that set. They're at the top, but they're not quite going to go in the next set, and I don't want them bouncing backwards and forwards. And one parent used a football league analogy with me, at which point I was lost. And then, because we are a high school, just want to talk about people. This conversation comes up, and I've got an email to reply to this week about whether or not it's a 2-year or a 3-year. In fact, it's an 11-year programme of study from year 1 right through to year 11. But when people ask, do you have a Key Stage 3 and a Key Stage 4? No, we don't. We have a 3-year scheme of work. The fact that it covers both the Key Stage 3 and the Key Stage 4 learning objectives. Because if you look there, you'll see at the top of one, Key Stage 3 number B, it's order positive and negative integers. Right underneath that is the Key Stage 4 learning objective. And I always struggle with this question about 2-year or 3-year, because are we expected to teach them that in years 7, 8, 9, and then teach them the same thing again when they get to year 11, year 10 and 11? My gut reaction is, no, you don't get to start at year 10 and go, right, we're going to order positive and negative integers. You teach them in a way that amalgamates all of those learning objectives to get them to their end result by the end of year 11. So I'm always a little bit confused about it. So having a scheme of work that works for you is massive.
Yeah, we've tried so many different things over the years, haven't we, in terms of off the shelf, designing our own, editing an off the shelf to make it work for us. But what we've always come back to is this, and please don't take any of the language I use in terms of, when I say crossover, meaning it's any kind of trimmed requirements. This is nothing like that. This is just the organisation. So we've got 3 strands that we work with, and it does play into our arrangement quite well that we're a high school, year 9, 10 and 11. But nonetheless, we utilised it, and we worked with this process with our secondary school that we both moved from, 7, 8 and 9. But essentially 3 skills, 3 areas, three-pronged attack, I suppose. You've got the working towards, your crossover and working above. So if we put this into other language, working above, higher only, appears only on the higher paper. Now, that doesn't mean students who don't do a higher paper don't see that content. Not at all. Like Mal just said, with index laws this week, I was pushing on with the group that predominantly will do a higher paper, but I'm not concentrating on higher. I'm concentrating on the areas of maths that I know that they need to be working on. The scheme of work, we're talking about crossover for that group, index laws. So we enable ourselves, and it's within our scheme of work as well, that exposes the next step on, the next little dip in your toe in. And that's the phrase I use with the students. Let's dip our toe in the next step. So we actually got to the point, and it was so humbling, Mal, I wish you were there on Monday to see it, that a group, the same ilk of group a couple of years ago when we first joined the school, were challenging. I'm not saying these are a walk in the park. I'm saying that we've grown with these students. They know our routine. They know our organisation. 3 years ago, I would not have been able to, in the same scenario, same group in same school, same classroom, be able to push on like I did on Monday. And it was a negative fractional index laws with, the big one in brackets that you often see way towards the end of a higher paper. So working towards higher only, but the crossover enables you to dip your toe into that. Then you've got the crossover, which is what we talk about a lot, which is the common assessed material between the two. But then the working towards underpins everything. And again, what Mal said a minute ago, ordering integers, the knowledge, the structure, the key stuff that comes up into GCSE is all there, enabling us to make sure we have ticked off the working towards. We have ticked off the crossover. Some students may not get further than that, but then we've enabled to push as many onto that working above. So we've got our 3-pronged attack. And I've got this big stress about the deep dive language. When someone comes in, whether it's Ofsted, anyone else, how do we know for sure that we are offering depth and breadth and everything involved to do with the spiral curriculum that leads up to year 11 with maths? And so we did, myself and Mal sat down, went through and made sure that all of the key stage 2, key stage 3 areas of maths are addressed, leading up to whether it's required prior knowledge within our scheme of work that goes to the next step, or actually within the working towards, maybe the actual objective, not just the required prior knowledge. So we've got it. We've made sure that it's worked within that spiral organisation, but also the key 3 areas and that 3-pronged attack that we've really got to make sure. And Mal's put it at the bottom there of this slide about the tiering decisions, the biggest challenge we face. And it is purely down to the wire with some students. It really is.
So in terms of how that looks for us, this is our curriculum overview. We got our low attainers, our middle attainers and higher attainers. At any point, students will move between those 3 streams. This year looked a lot different, as did last year, where all of our students, because of bubbles, we put everybody on a working towards in year 9 because we had mixed attainments and we wanted to just make sure that there was no gaps in anybody's knowledge. So this is our 3-year, but equally well, it works over a 2-year. So our middle attainers, we will look to do crossover over 2 years, which takes them to the top of the foundation, with a view that some of those at the bottom, at the start of year 11, some of those middle attainers, those that haven't gone on to the higher tier early because we've assessed them, will go on to do an adapted higher, or some will stay with us in intervention and we will teach them the topics as required. It's something that we've been working on for years, well, since at least 2017 in terms of formalising it. Prior to that, we were a little bit maverick. And then as a 2-year, that's what it would look like. In terms of assessments, all of our year groups, this is something that we have had to fight for at our current school when we went in there, and the plan was that end of year 9, end of year 10 would be one paper. We have fought that our end of year 9 assessment, our end of year 10 assessment, so end of years are 3 papers. Our philosophy on that is that we don't feel we can give a prediction or rounded working at grade off one paper. And I know there's a whole school of thought about giving people past papers back in year 9, back in year 10, and I'll explain in a minute why our philosophy about that. But we did have to fight to get the 3 papers. Our years 9 and 10, they will do a baseline assessment, which is their paper 1 in the September. We will then aim to get 3 papers. So by the end of the year, because they're done in class, we'll try to get another, like I say, 3 papers for those year groups done by Easter. And I want to touch on this, why we give them full papers. If you imagine that is a 3-year journey, you're like the mountain, Seeger. Our view,
it's better when you normal triangle
that I draw on the board. And I talk through students through this to say the reason we are giving this to you, and yes, we know there's content not in there, but Seeger's argument will always be, but conversely, there's content on there that a student knows that they may not have been explicitly taught, that they can problem solve their way through. So if we show it back in year 9, what a paper looks like, the gradient to climb the top of that mountain is like that. If we show it in year 10, the gradient looks like that. If the first time they see a paper is the start of year 11, it's a little bit hairy for some students. So our students understand the size of the mountain they need to climb. And there are some schools, believe it or not, and I know some of you, it's not meant to be a judgment, that don't show students a past paper until at some point in year 11. We were doing some support with the school who was saying that they only ever do topic assessments, and a student would in their school will not see a past paper. They're made by the teachers until Easter of year 11. For us, and if it works, it works in your context, in that context. For us, it didn't work. And Seeger's got experience with the old linear, modular, what was it? Graduated assessment, where it was...
The old modular, we trialled it when it came out. So it was the EdXL. And the first, it was split into assessments, and we had the 2 groups in year 10 going into 11 trialling it. And the first module assessment was data handling. And it was a dream. I'm being honest. It was a dream. So the year 10 at the time, when they do that assessment, they were brilliant at it. Absolutely brilliant. This maths malarkey is a piece of cake. It's easy. And then there was an algebra assessment for the next one, and it's the first one set them up that they didn't need to do any work. And then they didn't do any work, and then it was even harder anyway, the assessments, and it was terrible. And that's not just because of it being a topic based. That was more because of the organisation of it. But it will still happen that some areas of maths are generally, we know it when you're teaching a group, generally absolutely you have that buzz feeling, everyone's got it. That's probably down to the teacher, but also a little element down to what you're teaching them. And then another topic that just never goes quite right, or it's very, very tough, or only some people get it. And just likewise, when you put those topics into a test of all of that type of area of maths, you're going to have fluctuations, you're going to have ups and downs, but it's also not the experience they're going to have at the end of year 11 when they don't know it's going to be a Pythagoras question coming up. Looking at the November papers just then, there's a brilliant one with a perimeter, and you had to do Pythagoras first to work out the hypotenuse to do the perimeter. That if that was in a topic test all about Pythagoras, brilliant. I'm going to have probably a false sense of security that kids will get something right because they know that that's the area of maths they're about to do. When it's in an exam and it's hidden within a paper somewhere, that's when you need to know, can they do it or not?
And we've always been a massive advocate of past papers. We do know there is the issue around security and people getting the solutions, so we use alternate versions, or we try to, where we have changed the numbers in the question. But also, because they've gone through a national cohort, when it comes to grade boundaries, we're going to talk a little bit about grade boundaries, that grade boundaries do exist. So we will use that as part of our data process, but we don't necessarily pick up those grade boundaries and apply them. So when it does come to our grade boundaries, this is Seeger's little, he's passionate about the grade boundaries.
Always. We've got this, we utilise, and it's Unjust Maths, we utilise this alternate exam paper creator. And we had a big discussion when we set this up. Do we put mock sets in there? And we had to put it from our perspective, ours. Mock sets are great. Samples are great. But I really need to know how someone's performed against the general population of that year group, which is, 500,000 students. Not just samples of people who have done stuff, but also it's been out there and been done. There are obviously these caveats. Miles just said it. They're out there. Answers are out there. So we have to. We always try and use a full exam paper that's been a normal sitting, a summer sitting, a November sitting, but they are out there. So we do little strategies. We give them paper 3 for paper 2. Change the front covers on them to throw them a little bit. We have to drill into them, and this is the biggest one that seems to work. And we do this whatever, even if the mark scheme says correct answer only 2 marks, they will only get 1 or 1 out of 3 for the correct answer only. If it's blatant that they've not even done any work and in the question needed the work, and they'll get nothing anyway. So we really drill that home. But the only way of us really knowing where that bar has been set previously and going forward is from the proper full sittings. And I am passionate about the grade boundaries.
But also, if we, for example, use the summer papers where the grade boundaries are were quite low, we will apply. We will not necessarily, in fact, we haven't done for 3 years, applied those grade boundaries. Internally, we may for us and have a sense of they'd be all right, but for the students, and especially those trickier students, and you'll all know them. If I said to, for example, Ty, who's done no work, you've got a grade 4 at his mock, he might think he's going to rock up to the real thing having done no work and still get a 4. Whereas we need them to keep on working, in fact, do even more work. And so we will apply tough grade boundaries to whatever data so we don't stick rigidly to it. It is almost like the grade boundaries for the paper that was sat for us. And so when students will say, but you only needed 36 for a grade whatever, we're saying, no, that might be for that paper, but we've decided to grade them differently. Because they will still... that's been quite a tough conversion for teachers around us, not to say to students, but if we use the real grade boundaries, that would have been a grade C or a grade 4 or a grade 5 or... and we have to... That's an education process that message to some students means isn't enough. They need to keep doing more.
I think the whole CAGs and tags process that we've all been through has actually really backed up this argument that we had to see what the students can do, not what they can't do, but also gathering the evidence for what they can do. So going through the tags and CAGs process has really has cemented this process for us that we've got to see what you can do, but we've got to keep the bar high so you know what you're aiming for. And Mal says if they might do a November exam paper for an internal assessment or a mock. We won't use November paper grade boundaries. They're complete. It's a different cohort of students that went in to do that assessment when it was a real exam. So we'll go back. We've got all of the grade boundaries over the years, and we tend to really hone in on what is the toughest, highest grade boundaries and almost apply that to every single sit-in. So what was it for the easier paper in, say, summer 19 compared to the harder papers, not harder or easier, more organised papers compared to the original paper in 2017. But yeah.
So that brings us on to having that high bar. So I know that there is the discussion about the formula sheets will be available or are available. We've had quite a lot of discussions about, do we give them to students for their mocks in two weeks? Do we give them a topic list because that's what they'll get in the summer? And our view, we have come to the conclusion, is that we're not providing students. And again, you have to make your own decision. We're not providing formula sheets to our students, and we're not providing them advance notice of the topics. It is a decision for us about keeping that bar, keeping them going, saying, right, we need you to do more. Still not enough, because it is never enough. Let's be brutally honest, a student who is naturally going to get a 4 will always do that. Those that you're trying to push even further. So the formula sheets are available on the website. Topic lists, I think the Ofqual have said they'll be available from February. They see no reason for the advance notice of the topics to be released earlier. There is a specific date in February by which they will be released to us. But the formula sheets are available for all the boards. They contain the same information for all the boards. And so we're not doing any of that because our view is that anything they get, because of the advantage that will give them in the summer, means that it will be over and above what they're performing at now. So it's going to push them even further. Whether that's harsh, I'm going to make no apologies for it, but that's the strategy we decided because we want more out of our students.
We think in the March mock, the second mocks that we're going to have February, March, that's when we'll introduce the formula sheet. We haven't got a clue on this pre-release idea, topic list, whatever it's called, purely because we need to see what's the wording going to be. It might be that generic and open that it's going to be no benefit even in the summer. And then we go and design something now that gives far too much away, that skews our results completely the wrong way. So we're not given any idea of what's going to be on there. But the formula sheet, we're thinking about gradually bringing in, not just suddenly plonk it on a desk. We want to train them how to use it properly. That's the real reason it's not going to be there. It will be there by March mocks and in the summer, so they've got the full swing of it, but it's not going to be something that just lands not used. It's all about, at the end of the day, it's going to be about substitution. And are we confident enough at the moment with our students on substitution across the board and gaining the marks on the substitution to be able to confidently go, this is what it looks like. It's about training them up. That's the reason at the moment. I think we've said that a few times now, haven't we? Identify the students as early as possible.
Which is why it's in capitals.
Oh, okay. Reminding. Okay.
Yeah, so once we've identified our students at the end of year 10, they all go into our intervention set. We've then laid out our scheme of work based on week by week what we would expect to be taught. The intervention set, it does say topics to be advised. That's because we're the only ones that teach them, or teach them in a super group. And then it lays out what our adapted higher will be doing and what our higher attainers will be doing. What's been really useful this year I think for me and the other members of the team, is we added in when parents' evening were, when the data drops were, and when we planned to do assessments. right from the start of the year, and I refer to that quite often now. Just should have done a Year 9 assessment last week. No, we have done a Year 9 assessment. And then what does the intervention set look like?
We call it the super group. We had like I mentioned before, some visitors come and have a look at it. Feel free to contact us if you want to even have a nose. What came out of it more than anything on Thursday when we chatted to the visitors after is not the content. We know it's high driven, high focus, organisation. We've got bread and butter starters there as well, organised process. What it was brilliant for is that it is two groups essentially put together, so two members of staff in one room. No matter the size of a group with one teacher, you've only got one set of eyes, whether it's 10 people in a class or 55 people in a class, you've only got one set of eyes. But as soon as there's another set of eyes that is generally at the back facing forward and supporting from that side, and the front set of eyes from the teacher delivering and supporting going that way, it's a different kettle of fish in that room. There's a different feel in that room. You almost know as someone in that classroom, you are closer to a support network, not just the one person that's the person stood at the front. That could be quite away from, is further than half a classroom away from a member of staff in that super group. That's the big thing that came out. And I never really thought of it in that way before. It was proper support from all directions. It really is.
Yeah.
But then again, another thing that came out was the support for staff. There's two members of a team that are automatically working together to develop the crossover, the grades, the 4-5 borderline, that is training staff within the team on how to maximise teaching. And then you can rotate the staff around who gets exposed if you've got strong members that can lead it. So it works in twofold, staff and students.
Yeah, I think the one thing for me is the moral support of knowing, because if you're because generally my experience has been that it will be the head of department whose neck is on the line that has, if they haven't got somebody within their team that's focus is those 4-5, those crossover group, they take them on and they develop that as a specialism. And it can be quite lonely when, and also hard work when it's just those generally they're underperforming students, that it's draining. And knowing that that's what you've got to do 5 lessons a week or 4 lessons a week, having another teacher there to go, actually, that was really good today. Or did you notice he was on it? They weren't on it. That moral support, I think, is invaluable. And knowing that you're not in there alone, because teaching can be quite lonely. And then obviously, I've spoken about these interleaved. All of our lessons, we start with what we call bread and butter starter, where I map out. I'm going to go back to that. I map out on a little spreadsheet to make sure I'm going back and revisiting topics, so I'm not just teaching rounding and error intervals and never seeing it again. That continually appears in front of the students. Again, because behaviour has to be bob on with these kids, everything that appears on there, they have done. We take no excuses as to why they can't access a certain question. And that, I think, is key for us as well, because generally they will be sometimes a problem for behaviour. And so we just eliminate all the excuses.
We talked about the crossover scheme of work, and it's not from us. We've not made this up. This is from the DFE programme of study. We ripped it apart. We found everything in there. We cross-referenced it to every previous exam that's been sat by AQA, OCR, Edexcel, Welsh Board, to maximise and look for the areas that are in that crossover, because the DFE programme of study is great. It goes through everything in terms of what it is, but sometimes you go, well, how does that look? And that really helps to make sure you know what the end game is as well, not just with one exam. I know this is Pearson, but there's plenty of exams you can look at to get different spins on things as well in terms of helping the students prepare. An exam question is an exam question.
Yeah, I think that's really key, looking for other questions. So we've identified students end of year 10. They've gone into their intervention sets. We baseline assess them at the start of year 10. Then there is some teacher judgment that comes in terms of have they got the wherewithal for higher or foundation. And then we also look at attendance, specifically with the current climate. They have 2 sets a year of mocks. They're just about to do their first set, 3 papers. And I know some schools are struggling to get 3 papers. It is something we will continue to fight for, particularly for mocks. The second mock we may not get in exam conditions. It will probably be, and we're really lucky that our maths, they're either in maths a lesson, then followed by English, or English followed by maths. So we have agreed that in order to facilitate a next set of mocks, if we don't get them in the hall, is that we will take some time from English, and they'll effectively keep their kids for 2 hours. We'll do a paper and we'll swap over so they get the time back. So we'll do whatever we need to do to facilitate it. And then where we're currently at is that for our foundation students, we are looking at our crossover marks. There are some students going back in our current year 10s that are fighting for the higher tier. And part of our focus for that is, when I did the review with them, was saying, so how many marks did you get on the foundation from questions 24 to 32? If you did not get 12 marks there, you would have got a grade U on had you sat the higher tier. So we're trying to get them to get their head round it isn't either or. They have got to build up their knowledge to get onto the higher tier. We have a couple of students that we think we could still push towards the higher tier, so we'll look to possibly give them the rest of the higher tier paper, say, right, you've done the foundation, let's have a look at the rest of this paper. And then we are going to still consider whether or not we've still got any concerns on higher tier. Because I think that we can't take our eye off the ball. Would be fair to say, wouldn't it?
Definitely. We call the foundation paper challenge, and mentioned it several times. When you've got that high focus on the crossover material within the lessons, and I've already alluded to the fact that you don't want to then drive a foundation feel throughout a group. What we've done is brought in, and we've got a Saturday school coming up on the 27th, and half of that session we know we're going to do a foundation paper challenge where they get a chance to go back over the basics, and you have conversations around it in the lesson. Don't do it too often in the lessons. It can be bonuses like your Saturday schools, half-term revisions, after-school sessions. But it's just a competition. How far can you get through without dropping a mark? And they're constantly seeing the basic skills, and you're having little conversations about key questions rather than it being a whole lesson focus. If you let it be, you could have a whole lesson on drawing axes and bar charts and remembering to label the axes. That as part of the foundation paper challenge, they've done it within a question. You allude to, don't forget to label the axes, because it's a skill that they're good at and they know it from primary school, middle school, secondary school, whatever. It will stay in their head. You don't have to do a whole lesson around it. And I had to be reminded about this after the exam in 2017, that I forgot all about the basics because there was the height of the man versus the height of the tree. But we'd been talking about that basic stuff and having it built in terms of foundation paper challenges all year. So just think about alternative ways to bring in key skills, key facts. Mal's talked about the bread and butter. I'm just talking about another option here, which is the foundation paper challenge.
And then we have, for all our students, we start to think now about that we're talking to parents about this is the final stretch now. So, which regardless of where they're at, and this really links into even our higher tier students need to cover the basics. So we've looked at some frequency analysis, and we're starting to share after the mocks. We need to get these out of the way. We need to feed back to students their performance, because then that's when they start thinking about, okay, what else do I need to do? So I've looked at the frequency analysis for the 1 mark questions for those that are doing foundation. And I call that the final stretch, where it's a one sheet saying these are the questions that came up on rounding and error intervals that I've collated from Pearson's papers. And then after Christmas, my final countdown kicks in, where every week we will email parents to say if they're doing. So every student will get the crossover, because. So it's basically 10 questions ish, based around 3 topics. So it further interleaves on what they were taught. So not only are they getting the practice, revisiting that practice on the bread and butter, they're getting these out to parents, and it goes for about 20 weeks. Every student will get the crossover paper. It's got the mark scheme attached to it, so that with no intention that they bring it in to be marked, they can check it themselves. Our higher tier students will get something that follows the higher tier topics, and then our other foundation tier students will also get some basic skills kind of questions, 1 mark. 1 mark questions, and that's going to start again. They will get their results, I think, first week in January in an informal results day. And then it becomes, so if I'd done that, this is what I would have got. So we can then start again. Yep, let's step it up a gear. And this is what we're going to do to support you.
We've got PE intervention that runs. We always make sure that we've got someone in the maths department timetabled as free if we've got flexibility when core PE is on. And then we can work through and rotate through some key students. We brought this in 3 years ago, and I had to battle and fight. We're at the point now, because it's the norm, students asking for it. So it does take time. It does. It's not something that I advocate taking out of other subjects. But when there's an opportunity to use within a certain area of the curriculum that not all students participate in it anyway, you'll be surprised how many don't bring their PE kit on purpose that would want to do it. After school sessions for the revision, we start it from week 3 in September. We don't like leaving it. We want them to get into the organisation, the routine. And I've already mentioned we've got a Saturday school where we're going to, it's the first one we've done in 2 years. So it's going to be dipping our toe into it and getting back used to it again. But a 2-hour session, key topics. It's the day before 2 days before their mock on the Monday. But we'll also do a foundation paper challenge in that time as well, just to get them seeing questions ready for that exam.
What's been interesting with the Saturday school is we mentioned it to students, and because we've capped the number that we're inviting because it's the first time we're doing it, and we've done it by invite only. So we're going for our, to use a cliche, low-hanging fruit to get them over the line. And we have got students that are coming up saying, can I do it? Can I come in on that Saturday? And it's almost, really? You're really going to get in on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock? So it almost becomes, once you've put a little bit of a barrier up, they want to get involved. So that's been quite nice this week as well. And you've had some responses as well, Seeger.
I've had 3 in today, and I assume our head of department also had a few in today. I'm assuming saying yes, emails from parents, so it is good. But nothing... I was just going to say that nothing matches teaching them well. All these things are bolt on. You've got to teach them well, prepare them well.
We've had a question saying, do we not have a foundation tier only group? Are they always in crossover right up to you decide the tier in year 11? Essentially, yes. So we currently have 10 sets, 2 parallel sets of 5, essentially. Our set 5s in both bands have such small numbers in that what we are going to look to do now is that hopefully, if we've got this right, our super group, we will take off the top, have a really small adapted higher group that will benefit from being in a 10 or 12, maybe 15 max with one teacher, and we will absorb that bottom of that foundation, bottom foundation only group. But we're talking about numbers that are less than 10 in there. They also have, for purposes of data, they have our persistent non-offenders on their register, just because it makes sense from, what did I say? Non-offenders. Yeah, non-attenders, that's what I meant. It's been a long day today. So yeah, but even our foundation only group, it's about having that the high expectations for them and not just saying, look, we're only going to teach you. And let's be honest, some of these students, no matter how many times you teach them a certain real basic content, they may still not have the motivation to apply it because it's the same old stuff they've seen for 10 years. You show them the reason they need to remember 10 squared is 10 times 10, not 20, because they need to apply it to Pythagoras. All of a sudden, their motivation to learn maths might change. And I'm not saying it will, but sometimes it does. But the intention is that, yeah, there's a bit of teacher judgment in there to go, actually, I'm not going to push this to simultaneous equations. But the plan will be that if they have the ability, why not try some really simple simultaneous equations with them? But the plan for us is to absorb them into our supergroup, hopefully by the end of the year.
This is not a plug. This is to say, if anyone has not had one in the post at their school, just drop me an email. I've tried to get one out to most schools over the last couple of months. I can always tell you when one is coming out because we've got them in phases going out. So just let me know if you haven't received a crossover revision guide that we're trying to get out there. Just drop us an email. EdExcel support, don't forget about. The Emporium Grill, everything's in there. If you haven't got a login, very easy. Just Google the Maths Emporium and then register. Exam Wizard, which is where you can put together your exam papers, your final countdowns, exam questions from all of the different maths sittings over the years, including the last GCSE. Results Plus, which is going to be brilliant as we start getting into back of routine of exams. So Results Plus and Script Viewer more so in September, so don't forget that you can then go back and analyse your results and look at what we did well, what we didn't do so well, but also cross-reference that to kids' scripts. You can have a look at those scripts completely free of charge with the Pearson service of Script Viewer. And last but not least, I've already mentioned it, don't forget about us. We're there to support, and some people do email and say, oh, but what is the charge? There is no charge. This is as long as we can facilitate it and it works within what you can offer in terms of days available and what we've got, we'll get there and we'll do something with you guys. I'm not sure if you want to mention that one quickly, Mal, the enhanced tiering support.
Oh, the advanced tiering support is still available. It's available on the Emporium and also the website. So there is the guidance that includes exemplification of the kind of material responses you should see from a grade 4 or grade 5 students. There's some diagnostic tests. Some people found it useful, some people didn't. It is there as another, again, it's about context. You might be in a situation where you need evidence to have that tough conversation and to say, look, even the support we can get from the exam boards suggests you should be on foundation or should be higher. I know you don't want to do the higher because you're worried about whatever that conversation, it's another level of support that you can use. And that's, so like I say, it is available out there. And then the last one is, if you have any questions, email Christian.
Or
you'll get a
justmaths.co.uk.
You will get a faster response from Christian at justmaths.co.uk.
Even if it's just
generally,
a hi, definitely.
Yeah. Generally, there will be questions about, I have this student, what would you advise? Or a group of students. It's about relationships with students. And I know it is a tough decision, and we all want to make the right decision. And sometimes it doesn't always go in their favour. But it's about thinking ahead. And I'm going to go back to that one slide where it says it's about making that decision as early as possible and sticking to it. For us, the one thing that has helped is parental engagement. Sometimes picking up the phone and investing 3 or 4 hours. And again, I'm not advocating it because of time of workload, but for us in year 10, I think we've got most parents on side because we pre-advise them. There's been no major hiccups, I suppose. So, but yeah, any questions, even if it's just like Seeger's just said, even if it's just to say hi, just let us know. Or I'm just going to open up the Q&A. I think most of the Q&As have, but you will get copies of the slides, and everything in the group chat, I think, has been done. It's been quite a quiet group chat for once, Seeger. Unusually.
The emails are going to come through, aren't they?
Yeah.
But no, keep in touch. It automatically turns off at 5:29, so just in the interest of it being wrapped up properly, and Seb can say goodbye as well. I think Seb's there. But thanks for listening, everyone, and keep in touch.